Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're your shortcut to, well, getting genuinely well-informed.
Yeah, we sift through all the stuff, articles, notes, you name it.
And we pull out the key nuggets for you. Today, we've got a really remarkable story. A maybe shocking invention you probably use every single day.
But the inventor, you've almost certainly never heard of him.
Right, so picture this. It's 1821, New York City.
Bustling? Yeah, but totally different from today. No electricity, none of that.
Just, grit and ingenuity. And in that environment, a black man creates something.
Something revolutionary. Something we still rely on.
Exactly. It's woven into our daily lives, but his name.
It's just not in the history books, generally speaking. It's missing.
Yeah, glaringly absent. And that's what this deep dive is about, really. How does that happen?
It's fascinating because we're talking about the very start of modern dry cleaning.
Dry cleaning, okay.
Yeah. The inventor was Thomas Jennings. And his method back then was called dry scouring.
Dry scouring.
Okay. It was a huge deal. A breakthrough for taking care of clothes, fabrics.
That became indispensable, right? People needed it.
Absolutely. Changed everything for certain kinds of garments.
So there it is, the big reveal. Dry cleaning, we send our suits, our nice dresses.
Because you can't just toss in the wash.
Right. We all rely on it. And our mission here, for you, is to explore how the guy who started it all could be so overlooked.
What does that erasure, that historical gap, really mean?
What are the implications when someone like Jennings gets left out of the story?
It's a crucial question. And if you look at the bigger picture, Thomas Jennings wasn't just an inventor.
Oh.
He was actually the first African-American to hold a U.S. patent.
Wow. Okay, the first?
The very first. For that dry scouring method, patent granted in 1821.
1821. That date. It really stands out when you think about the context, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, put that achievement in perspective.
Yeah, it's sort of mind-boggling. While Jennings is getting a U.S. patent.
Recognized for his intellectual property.
The grim reality was that slavery was still legal and deeply entrenched across most of the country.
Exactly. How do you even reconcile that? It forces you to confront a really uncomfortable part of that history.
It really does.
But it also highlights this incredible resilience.
Yeah.
Right? Ingenuity thriving despite these enormous systemic barriers.
Yeah.
For Jennings, getting that patent in 1821 as a black man, that was monumental.
Just the act itself.
Yes. Formal recognition from the U.S. government that this idea, this intellectual property was his.
At a time when millions of black people were legally considered property themselves.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So the patent itself was this powerful statement against the injustice of the era.
That's a perspective I hadn't fully grasped. It wasn't just, hey, I invented something useful.
No. It was about ownership, recognition, dignity in a system actively denying those things.
And his story doesn't end with just the invention and the patent, does it? He did more.
Oh, much more. He didn't just sit on the money he made.
Right. He wasn't just about personal wealth.
Far from it. He used the fortune he built from dry scouring.
The money from the invention.
Yes. He used it to actively fund and support abolitionist movements fighting against slavery.
Okay, wait. So, every time you or I or anyone drops off clothes at the dry cleaner,
you're connecting, in a way, to that legacy.
A legacy of resistance, embedded in, getting your shirt cleaned?
It's kind of amazing, isn't it? A direct line from this everyday service back to the fight for freedom and civil rights.
That is. Yeah, that's incredibly powerful. I'll definitely think about that differently now.
It shows how individuals can use their success, their platform, whatever it is, for bigger change.
It reframes things completely. We just sort of assume these services, these technologies just appeared.
Like they dropped out of the sky.
But behind them are real people, real struggles. Sometimes these incredible stories of resilience,
And the truth we're digging into today is how often we just don't hear those stories.
Like Jennings. His invention is everywhere, but his story.
Yeah.
Buried.
Yeah, buried for far too long. It's more than just being overlooked, though.
What do you mean?
Well, it speaks to how dominant historical narratives get formed. Who gets credit? Whose story gets told?
Right. The standard version of history often leaves people out.
It does. And it takes real effort, like this deep dive, to unearth stories like Jennings's, stories that challenge what we think we know about American innovation.
It makes you wonder, who else?
Exactly. What other foundational figures, what other major contributions have just been obscured?
So let's talk about the implications then. What does Jennings's story really mean for us today, looking back?
I think the central truth here, the real takeaway, is just how easily significant people and their work can be sidelined.
Erased, almost.
Or actually erased, yeah. Even when their innovation is something we use constantly, it becomes invisible.
And it's not just like, oh, a fun history fact. It affects our understanding.
Totally. It shapes our perception of who innovates, who contributes, who builds things. It's about giving credit where it's profoundly due.
And realizing our understanding of the past might be incomplete.
Often very incomplete.
Yeah.
Shaped by who had the power to write the narrative.
Okay, so let's recap the key points for you. Thomas Jennings.
The first African American to hold a U.S. patent. That was 1821.
For dry scouring, the ancestor of modern dry cleaning.
And this incredible achievement happened while slavery was still the law of the land in much of the U.S.
Making that patent not just an invention, but an act of defiance, of progress.
And crucially, he didn't just profit. He poured his fortune into fighting slavery.
Supporting abolitionist causes. So there's this deep legacy of resistance tied to, well, the dry cleaner down the street.
Yeah, it's quite something.
And that brings us to a final thought, something for you to maybe chew on. How many other geniuses, other Thomas Jenningses, were just written out, erased from history?
And what happens when we actually do the work? When we dig them up?
When we find these buried stories and finally give them the spotlight they deserve?
How might that change how you see the world? How you understand progress?
Human ingenuity. There are countless stories still out there, waiting
to be uncovered. And maybe, just maybe, they can inspire us in entirely new ways.